This is the Enjoyer Podcast. I'm your host, James Dickson.
Here's some 2026 truths for you. If Republicans are going to succeed in 2026, they need a whole ballot approach to the election. Now, what do I mean by whole ballot? That means good candidates. It means strong ballot measures that drive out turnout. And then it means people who actually vote the entire ballot, even the races that might not get mentioned on Fox News, the Michigan Supreme Court races. I just did a video the other day about how elections have consequences, citing a Michigan Supreme Court ruling that found that about 600 19 and 20-year-olds in Michigan need to be resentenced because when they killed someone, they were so young their brains hadn't fully formed. So they need to be resentenced. And I'd ask you, when you hear that story, or any story, what's the limiting principle? If a 19 and 20-year-old are not adult enough to be viewed as adults after they've committed murder, what's to stop it from being a 30 and a 31-year-old, 50 and a 51-year-old? What's the limiting principle? What's going to be the end of it? At the end of it is going to be putting reasonable people in, people who follow the actual rule of law and not just their own opinions. I say all that to say this: elections have consequences. My guest today, Kevin Kijewski, is running for Attorney General. It's a race we don't think much about, but we need to think about it. We need to talk about it because, as we've seen with years of Dana Nessel, it does matter who is your state's chief legal officer. Kevin, welcome to the Enjoyer Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
What would make you want to do this? What makes us someone? You're a young 40s man. You're successful. You have a fine life. What would make you want to stick your neck out and get involved in the AG's race?
Honestly, if you would ask me the same thing 6 months ago, I would say you're crazy. But I had a lot of people from around the state actually reach out to me and say, you really need to think about doing this. I mean, everything from, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a bit here and there, but the alternate electors case regarding the Trump election back in 2020, going all the way to COVID as well, and all of those draconian lockdowns. I just really want to make sure those things that I've been involved in and trying to defend against never happen again. And that's why I really want to get involved and actually not just be involved, but be the chief legal officer and the top prosecutor for the state. Because freedom, that's not negotiable. And unfortunately, under Dana Nessel, and then possibly under a Democratic regime moving forward, it's not something to look forward to.
Absolutely. Let's game this out, because in the last 16 years, we've had it one way, which is where the governor, the attorney general, and secretary of state are all in the same party. Yeah. But before that, I mean, Granholm had it divided, where she was the one Democrat and the other two were Republicans. Engler's had it divided, where it was a Democrat attorney general under Frank Kelly. Let's say you were the attorney general when a Gretchen Whitmer was doing these pandemic orders. What could the AG have done to be a check on the governor in that case?
Absolutely. So we do represent the governor's office in the attorney general's department, should there be a need. However, my client would not be the governor. My client would be the people of the state of Michigan. And I have to stand up and defend their interests and their rights, even if that means that the governor is trying to trample on them. So if this were during COVID, I would actually file litigation against the governor's office to actually stop a lot of these draconian executive orders. And you take a look, for example, at even the Michigan Supreme Court. They came down inevitably, took them some time, but to say, Madam Governor, you are overstepping your bounds.
Right.
So frankly, if we actually had an attorney general, maybe like myself, as opposed to Nessel at the time, we could have had clarity and closure and actually just sanity a lot earlier than what it took for those few years at the beginning of COVID.
I mean, it's incredible. When I watch a show like Southern Charm, set in South Carolina, when they talk about COVID, they talk about it like it was a bad month or two. Like that was kind of when the earth stopped moving. And then you quickly went back to real life. And part of me says that Whitmer's response was to help Biden out. But then it dragged on so much further past that. When you look at how our governor behaved in 2020, what was that?
I think that perhaps it was well intentioned at the very, very beginning because no one knew exactly what was going on. But then later on, it became fairly obvious that the governor, along with her supporters and others, really just got maybe a little bit too drunk with power. So actually, during COVID, I was the superintendent of schools for the Archdiocese of Detroit. So largest private school system in Michigan.
Absolutely.
27,000 students, 3,000 employees, about 90 schools. So when she actually shut down schools, in-person education at the beginning, we made do. And frankly, we had no academic or learning loss. But the people here in the state of Michigan kind of forget, and I'm glad that it wasn't necessarily notable. She tried to close down schools a second time. This was November of 2020. She wanted to shut down all of the high schools, claiming that these high school students are going to be spreading COVID, and that's, out of the necessity of maintaining public health. Well, myself, in addition to a few others, I was the vice chairman of MANS, the Michigan Association of Non-Public Schools. We're like, absolutely not. And I was the only attorney on the board. And I said, we got to challenge it. So we did. We filed suit in federal district court in the Western District of Michigan. And not even about a month went by. And then Governor Whitmer just dropped her mandate to shut down high schools. Why? And this is not necessarily covered in the media, but people can certainly take a look at the record. We were within hours of her press conference of actually the federal district court judge ruling in our favor and ruling against Whitmer. When she came out for her press conference, and again, it was unbeknownst to anyone, impromptu, we're just like, what? And she's like, well, the evidence and the science has changed. I'm like, what are you talking about? Oh, I know what happened. Because we're going to have this ruling in our favor. You're trying to save face. And again, I'm not trying to say that the governor is evil or anything like that. I'll let people have their own opinions. But at the very least, she was trying to save herself and her administration the embarrassment of losing in court. And shouldn't be about winning or losing. No, it actually was mooted out. So that's unfortunate. But
so, which also means you didn't get to get a ruling on the record.
That's right. But we actually have the argument on the record, and based upon the way that the judge was actually asking questions and how he was responding, it seemed very much like we were going to probably prevail on that restraining order on the governor's power. Yeah.
Talk about that. How? First of all, you're a young guy now, so several years ago you were in your 30s. How does such a young attorney come to be superintendent of the Catholic school system in Metro Detroit?
So I'm going to give you a very long story within about 30 seconds. So maybe people have heard of Teach for America, where you teach in an under-resourced public school.
Absolutely.
I did the Catholic school version of that. And it's called ACE, the Alliance for Catholic Education. Did that through Notre Dame. And you get paid a quarter a week, all the water you can drink. But, you're volunteering. And then what do you end up doing? You teach high school, and I did that in Denver, Colorado, back in the early 2000s. Then after that, I'm like, okay, it's time to make money, go to law school. Did that, practiced law for a few years after graduating. And then I get a call from the Archbishop of Philadelphia, Archbishop Charles Chaput. And I got to know him when I was doing this program. He's like, well, I need some help. Could you perhaps come here to Philadelphia, to Pennsylvania, and work with the high schools as basically superintendent, but also manage the legal aspects because the teachers were unionized out there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So long story short, I did that. And then I got recruited to go back to Denver to be superintendent out there. And I did that for about 2 years and I loved it. And then I got recruited to come back home. And then I did that for a few years as well. So everyone was, wonderful to work with. I had 3 wonderful archbishops. None of them became pope, but whatever. But they're all nice guys. And at the same time, I was able to offer my legal skill set to make sure that We maintained our schools, we maintained litigation under control, and we didn't have any type of problems. So that's kind of, the 2-minute version of how that happened.
It's just incredible. I was looking at this story from early March 2020, and you and other school leaders are trying to talk about what you would try to do to keep open, and to not only make it safe, but so people feel safe and continue to feel comfortable bringing their kids in. And then quickly, the governor just pulls the rug, and it doesn't matter what you're going to do. And there's no individual answers. And we're not asking whether you want to shut down.
Yeah.
We're telling you, as Lansing, we're telling you that your private school is going to shut down too. Let's play the alternate scenario. There's no statewide shutdown order. You're able to handle it. You're left to your own devices. What does that look like?
Well, if we were left to our own devices, the schools, I maintained, would have remained open unequivocally. Why? Because we didn't have any type of mass problems when it came to children or kids getting sick with COVID. I mean, we all know now, but we also knew this back then. It was people that had already pre-existing conditions.
If you're elderly or already sick, that's what was going to hurt.
Right. And I even told people at the time, this was like early 2020. I'm joking about it, but not joking. We can save a lot of money if we just had the most elaborate, expensive Meals on Wheels program for like senior citizens and others. Perhaps they can, suffer and die from this. And they did in the nursing homes, but that's beyond the point. We can actually spend maybe a few $1 billion, get them Capitol Grill, get them Olive Garden, whatever, sort of take care of them.
Make sure that the truly vulnerable,
right?
If I'm doing this to save grandma, then we need to make a whole of society effort to save grandma. Not just me not working, but also we're not going to put old people in with grandma, and we're going to make it so that grandma can stay, but we all can keep going.
That's right. And the problem is, of course, the COVID deaths in these nursing homes, they were 40% underreported. You had all these people that were not able to see their loved ones, but it's just awful,
And so we've heard for years about this achievement gap in schools, especially, that's in any school. The worst school in Michigan has an achievement gap between black kids and white kids. But then you think about the typical public school versus the Catholic school. There's a gap there. What's your impression on the effect of the COVID response on these learning gaps?
Well, it's interesting because unlike a lot of other places, we actually measured our learning progress. And we were actually able to demonstrably show that we didn't actually lose steam at all. We actually gained a little bit of steam. The kids stayed where they needed to be. And it's called STARS assessment. That's the assessment platform that we use that I brought when I came to the Archdiocese. And that was great. And not only did we actually not lose steam when it came to academic progress, so no learning loss, for the first time, I kid you not, in about 40, 50 years, the Catholic school system in the Archdiocese increased enrollment. First time in about 40 to 50 years, which is a wonderful thing in the sense that people saw what we were able to do and what we were able to deliver on. So after a few years being superintendent, I'm like, okay, I think, the music is still playing. Things are good. Things are stable. Time to move on and go back to regular law practice.
What's your read on why enrollment did increase at that time?
Because people were very unsatisfied with the public schools, how they handled things internally, how they spoke to parents, how parents would go to school boards and they were unresponsive. In fact, some of them were vilified or even called terrorists for expressing their
in Rochester, they would go after people's jobs. This person's too outspoken. Let's call her their employer.
Right. And then you take a look at the Catholic Church and its schools. Catholic Church actually teaches that the parent is the primary educator of their children. That's actually within this thing called the Code of Canon Law. So everyone has to abide by it. Doesn't mean that, parents can do whatever they want,
Right.
but they are the primary educator, and we have to take their concerns seriously.
Right.
So because of that, in addition to just the nurturing environment, the academic excellence, and also just how we have a great track record, people were attracted back to our schools. And the other thing too, I have a graduate degree in economics as well. We were actually able to lower the cost of doing business per pupil. We actually went through everything, did zero-based budgeting and saying, okay, what should a Catholic school look like? It's not that we're, doging ourselves or cutting the fat per se, but we want to be more efficient. And then what does that do? It permits more dollars generally to be available for financial assistance to families. So I'm very proud of the work that my team and I were able to accomplish during that time. And they're still very successful today under new leadership.
Was there a faith element to it that at this really a time when they were trying to spread fear, our governor was telling you, assume that you're sick. And we even had churches closed down, that the Catholics were some of the only people who were trying to stand strong. When that feedback filtered back to you, was there that aspect of, I need someone speaking to the faithful part of my child and not just the academics?
Yeah, and it's not just about the academics for sure. We take a look at heaven first, Harvard second. That was the attitude and the approach we had to every single student in the Archdiocese. And the Catholic faith is inextricably linked to the academic, I would say, success and the metrics that our kids have. And of course, you don't have to be Catholic in order to attend a Catholic school.
No.
We had tons of Jewish families, Protestant families, even families that were agnostic attend our schools because they appreciate the environment in which their children would be grown up in and be molded.
Yeah, you're safe in a culturally Catholic environment.
Yeah.
In a culturally Christian environment. And we used to have such a strong Christendom that people didn't feel the need to be faithful themselves because the culture that overlaid everything, there was enough guardrails on it. But I think so many guardrails have been removed that people are like, I need God.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mentioned I was superintendent of the Archdiocese of Denver for about 2-ish years. During that time, Justice Gorsuch got appointed to the bench and confirmed, and this all happened under President Trump. Well, Justice Gorsuch, when he was a kid, went to Catholic school in Denver. And through a few different phone calls and a few different connections, I actually, how every middle school, they take an 8th grade trip maybe to Washington, D.C. Well, his 8th grade, or the 8th grade at his school came to D.C., and we were able, and I flew out there, able to go have them see Justice Gorsuch at the Supreme Court. And he said one of the most remarkable things, he did other things too, like he actually personally brought the kids around on a tour with the court marshals, showing them everything. We went into actually the gallery, we went to the bench. The kids were able to see his seat. That was wonderful. But the thing I loved the most, and we were in this, I think it's called a drawing room or whatever, but it's a big room, huge windows overseeing the U.S. Capitol. And he says, why I love Catholic school? Because I had sister, and I forget her name, she's long past now, but I had sister so-and-so teach me to diagram sentences. And you know why that's so important? Because those guys across at the Capitol write the laws, but I tell them what they mean because they don't know even what their own particular words mean. But that's why myself, in addition to 8 other individuals, were able to do that. So thanks, sister. Without you, I would not be here at the Supreme Court. I thought that was a remarkable thing for these kids to hear. And that was his first group of students, I believe.
Could you imagine being an 8th grader and hearing that?
No.
That blows my mind, even hearing it third hand years later.
Yeah, and I can't even imagine, being a superintendent of a school system, being able to bring kids over there to meet with the justice and have that experience. But those things matter, right? So, I think all kids should have an opportunity like that. Just happened to be, of course, his Catholic school when he used to live in Denver as a kid. But yeah, Catholic schools, they make a big difference.
So That's probably, if you're known for one thing, it might be that. The other one might be your defense of, they call them the fake elector. I think alternate elector. I mean, if you read some of the stuff they print, so basically they would say the people who elected George Washington president were the fake electors because by rights we were still a British colony. Clifford Frost.
Yeah.
How did you come to take that case?
So I have some friends of mine in Macomb County, and when all this was going down, not exactly in 2020, but in about 2022, 2023, when this is starting to come to a head regarding possible charges by the AG, they reached out to me and they're like, you should meet our friend Cliff Frost. And I did. And they were charged with all of these felonies. And when I say they, I mean Cliff Frost, in addition to 15 others that were alternate electors during the 2020 presidential election. That's all they did. It was a protest, and they were trying to preserve the right of the people that they perceived at the time. Totally legitimate, okay? But they were charged with all these crimes, and if you would add up each one of these crimes and the maximum penalty for each crime, it's around 85 years. These are people, I'm not trying to call Cliff, old, but, he's, in his 70s. Some of these people are in their 80s.
He's no spring chicken.
He's no spring chicken, but he has spring in his step, right, along with a lot of these other people. But why is the Attorney General going after them when I maintain they didn't do anything illegal? There's no crime, none. And I won't get way into the weeds regarding the legality of it, but they're being accused of forgery, election forgery, uttering and publishing, all these other things. Well, in order to be guilty of forgery, a few things need to be proven. Number one, you put forward a document that purports to be something that it's not. The document only had the signatures of these alternate electors, and it said that they were the duly elected electors, and they were technically at the state GOP convention, because state statute says that's how you get these electors, okay? And second, there has to be a quote-unquote risk of loss according to Michigan law. The thing is, and to sort of really boil it down, in Michigan, we have a law against something called faithless electors. So that means that even if you had Democrats or Republicans or whomever as the electors and they vote for someone other than their candidate, they're disqualified. So even if they actually attempted to get in there, and when I say get in there, get into the state capitol building, they, according to Michigan law, would not be able to do that. And there are a few other reasons why. One of them is that there needs to be something called a certificate of ascertainment. Basically, these are documents that the governor and the secretary of state sign. They put their seals on it. They never forged or created those documents. So it's almost like they just had their certificate, which I maintain is a political protest. The First Amendment says you get to redress your grievances. That's exactly what that is. And they didn't have any of these other corresponding documents. And they're treating them like they are basically individuals that are trying to overthrow the country.
So they didn't say, we have an alternate governor who stamped it and an alternate secretary of state who stamped it. Yeah. They're just saying we have, this is our elector slate, period. We're not purporting it as if, it is the alternate slate.
Yeah. And then during the preliminary examination, for your viewers, felonies, you have something called a preliminary exam that happens at district court. You just got to prove it's a 25% chance that these guys did it, called probable cause. We've been at the district court level for 2 years. But during the preliminary examination that we had, it's ridiculous. It's a clown show. And I'm not saying it's a clown show because of the judge. I'm saying it's a clown show because of the Attorney General's office. But during the preliminary exam, we actually had the chief counsel for the U.S. Senate actually testify. This was the person to advise Mike Pence on all of these different things. Mike Pence never had, according to that general counsel, that certificate from these electors, these alternate electors here in Michigan. So that goes back to this risk of loss argument as well. There's absolutely no risk of loss. Someone kept it from him, or he decided not to bring it up with him to the Senate chamber? I don't know. But ultimately, he didn't have it. So there isn't any possible risk of loss here. And what even takes the cake more is you have the Attorney General gave a talk to all of these Democratic operatives, and she was caught on camera saying a few things. And I mean, they were terrible. The first thing that she said is that, well, these electors, they truly believed that Donald Trump won, and they were brainwashed. That in and of itself negates the whole case, because these crimes of forgery are what we call specific intent. She's saying that they didn't have specific intent, because if they truly believed it, there's no intent to deceive. So she basically just ruined her case on that. But that's not all. I feel like I'm Bob Barker on a game show. I'm like, there's more behind door number 2. Door number 2, you have the Attorney General stating that, oh, well, I brought the charges in Ingham County because it's a very Democratic county, and the jurors are Democratic. I'm paraphrasing, okay? But you could go to CNN and the Detroit News and all these other places that reported on this video, and basically that's what she said. That's absolutely wholly inappropriate. Prosecutors are not supposed to take a look at a person and then figure out a crime. They're supposed to see, was a crime committed? Then you go after that individual, but you do it dispassionately. You're not supposed to have any personal connection or gain or whatever in that. This is purely, unequivocally.
At Jack McCoy Law School, they explained that prosecution should be cold. Defense is hot.
That's right. This is lawfare, plain and simple.
Where does things stand right now?
So right now, the preliminary examinations are done because you had so many of these defendants. Again, you know, it went from 16 to 15. Someone took a plea deal and left, but they didn't really do anything. We had 3 separate examinations, each lasting a week. So imagine doing like a trial or a hearing 3 different times. So all of these happened. We did written summations, and Judge Simmons, to her credit, I mean, she's a very good, knowledgeable judge. I have nothing against her. And she even thinks that, you know, probably this is a lot to handle, and it is. But she's going through mountains and mountains of pleadings, of writings, and then she's going to issue an opinion.
Oh, boy.
But that's not all. I mean, you know.
Is the opinion going to be whether they should be bound over?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So whether or not they're bound over, and then that's a whole other process with circuit.
Then you start the trial.
Right. And these guys are being ridiculed and harassed, not just by the Attorney General's office, but also by 3 Democratic electors from 2020. So in the western half of the state, I think it's in Grand Rapids, in Grand Rapids and Kent County, they filed suit against all 16 civilly, saying that there's emotional distress that was caused by this, and that they attempted to steal their political office and all this other nonsense. Well, political office, you can't steal. It's not a tangible thing. So that's number 1. And number 2, emotional distress. Give me a break. There were emotions on all sides when it came to 2020. So myself, in addition to 2 other attorneys representing a group of these folks, we filed something called a motion for summary disposition, basically to kick this out. Hopefully we'll get a result soon on that. And then as well, and this is maybe new information, or at least it's been out there, but no one really talks about it until now. We sued, Clifford Frost sued in federal district court, Dana Nessel.
Yes.
And that basically, for the most part, was said by the district court judge, I'm not doing that. It's like, fine, we appealed to the 6th Circuit, and they just recently denied our appeal. So now we're going in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. We're going to be petitioning for certiorari, saying, hey, justices, please take a look at this case. And without getting into all the nerd talk and whatever else, the 6th Circuit, we asked them to do what the 5th Circuit next door does, handling these type of cases. If they would have done what the 5th Circuit did, and it's the Younger abstention doctrine. It's something you only read in a law textbook every now and then. But if they would approach that doctrine the way the 5th Circuit would, they actually probably would have allowed our case to proceed. And the Supreme Court, they're supposed to not just say what the law is, But if there's a circuit split, meaning that different circuits, federal courts do things differently, they're supposed to harmonize the law. So I'm not saying this will absolutely get accepted. We're working on the cert right now, the petition, but there's a better chance than not, given that it would resolve a circuit split, and we're trying to get this kicked out. So we're, all guns go on all so many different levels trying to defend these electors, and because they are defending the rights of all Michiganders to speak their mind.
It's funny as you're talking about this, it'd be similar to charging the staff at the Harvard Crimson for printing Harvard beats Yale 29-29. You know what I mean? It's not the official score that's kept. It's not. It is their interpretation of what happened.
That's right.
And I think the fact that, they're not the electors means that it is an act of protest. Like, it's all kind of baked into the cake. Suing Nessel, was that a risk worth taking?
Yes. And we brought it under the statute called 42 USC 1983. Basically, this is trying to say to someone, you can't violate the constitutional rights of a citizen under the color of state law. We're basically saying that she has instituted lawfare. In that particular civil rights complaint that we filed, we do make reference to that video I mentioned earlier about what Dana Nessel believes regarding the lack of criminal intent, and also how there are Democratic juries that will convict these people. But still, with all that being said, she brought charges. And what's even more interesting, or to go along with that too, you actually had the Ingham County Prosecutor's Office examine this case, and they actually wrote a nice, big, long, well-written memorandum of law, and they said, no crime was committed, so we're not charging this. They didn't charge a crime.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And we included that in there as well. So you have the Ingham County prosecutor saying, I'm not prosecuting. You have the Eastern District and the Western District Federal District Courts in Michigan with their U.S. attorneys. They didn't charge anything. But then you have Dana Nessel under this harebrained theory about, hey, forgery and uttering and publishing. What are you doing? It's legally
That's usually what people get charged with, like if they do a prank call and say, a bomb is at a school.
Yeah, uttering and publishing would be like, you got a forged check and you're trying to cash it, and, you get money for it or whatever else. I mean, this is not that at all. At all. And this is just purely lawfare. The process is the punishment.
Bingo. Because, so what? This all happened in 2020, 2021. It's 2025. Even if a resolution comes sometime soon.
Yeah.
That's a lot of time. That's a lot of energy. That's a lot of money.
And on the money part, I don't charge this much, okay? But speaking to other elector defendants, some of them have spent, on very nice, reputable, well-intentioned lawyers, almost $250,000 so far. So imagine
to beat a state case?
Yeah, to beat this particular case. I can say, in fairness, my good friend Cliff hasn't paid me anywhere near that amount, because this is something I truly believe in, and I'm just like, you pay what you can afford, right? But it's ridiculous. You have to put up your fortune, your savings, your retirement, whatever else. These are people in their 70s and 80s in order to defend against lawfare. This case is not going anywhere. It's not. And all she is attempting to do back then, and still attempts to do now, is just to fight out her personal animus with Donald Trump, but using, living vicariously through these other situations. That's what she's trying to do.
Oh, man.
And it's wrong.
So as you've embarked on this AG's race, do you call a Mike Cox? Do you call a Bill Schuette? Do you ask how you go about that convention process? Like, when you got serious about doing this, what happens then? So
initially what I did after talking to these people that inevitably convinced me I should run, and when I say people, I'm talking about grassroots votes. I'm not talking about large money people or anything like that, okay? I'm not even fundraising for my particular thing right now. I'm paying it all out of pocket right now, myself, at least initially. We'll see if I get the nomination or not.
Right.
But what we actually have is good relationships with all of these various congressional districts around the state. I mean, when you take a look at it, ultimately, as you have said before, it's a convention race. So these convention goers, these state delegates, will select whoever Secretary of State will be, Attorney General, individuals they'll be nominated to be on the ballot for Supreme Court. So I've been speaking with folks in all different congressional districts, like, for example, the 9th Congressional District. I've been out there a few times. Same thing here in I think your office is in the 10th, but in the 11th over there, Bloomfield, Birmingham, whatnot,
Right.
in Oakland County next door. I'll be talking with them soon. The 4th Congressional District, I'm doing their Lincoln Day dinner. So it's all these different various constituencies across the state. And their concerns are about really 3 big things. Number one, how can you put an end to the lawfare? And what are you doing about it? Well, right now, I'm fighting against the attorney generals, we noted, in all the different ways. Number 2, they want to know, this is what they all bring up organically in some way, shape, or form. What did you do during COVID?
Yes.
And I tell them, well, you know what? I didn't hide in my basement. And I didn't sort of say nice things about like, oh, we should just shelter in place.
Be reasonable.
Well, I was like, we're going to fight. And we did, and we won. No reason why the governor, in under a month, would change tune, especially a few hours before that district court judge was going to give a ruling. Okay. And the third thing they want to know is, are you going to prosecute real crimes? And the answer is yes. I mean, think about it. You have only so many attorneys, so many support staff in the Attorney General's office. If they're focusing upon these electors, if they're focusing upon individuals that they don't like, that want to try to do the Line 5 pipeline and all these other things, you're taking away resources and people that actually could be used to prosecute other crimes. You know, one interesting thing, when I announced it was in Lapeer County at the Lincoln Day dinner, and there was a county commissioner I was talking to over there, and he's like, you know, we actually need assistance because we can't afford it right now, but we need to have additional prosecutors to prosecute like terrible crimes like criminal sexual conduct, CSC. And they risk, perhaps not necessarily losing some cases, but not being able to timely charge some cases. Well, I told them the Attorney General's office, upon request, should render assistance.
Oh, yeah.
Time to time.
They love to take cases.
Yeah, they love to take cases. But the thing is, though, if your people are tied up in all of your political lawfare, you don't have the resources to give to, for example, the good folks in Lapeer County or other counties, people to actually prosecute real crimes.
There's only so many employees, and they have only so many hours in the day.
Right. And
people talk about we can do both. No, you won't.
And this is technically the largest law firm in the entire state. They have more they have more attorneys in their law firm than, Butzel Long, than Bodman, than, any of these other, big law firms here in the state. And they're wasting their resources on political tactics. That's what they're doing.
Speaking of which, what's your read on what happened with the Flint water crisis prosecution?
Well, I don't know if it's stupidity.
We're still waiting to get some documents from Dana Nessel, but basically, the House Weaponization Committee, they're looking at some of the same stuff you are.
Yeah.
We've had Dana Nessel be extremely active when she wants to be.
Right.
But then we had an actual injustice that cost actual people their lives, public health crisis.
Yeah.
I mean, no one will ever spend a day in jail.
And that's why I say, I don't know if it's stupidity or if it's just intentional misfeasance and malfeasance. I don't know. Because whatever it is, it was wrong. They decided, and Bill Schuette had some prosecutions lined up. He had people appropriately charged. But Dana Nessel takes over and with her staff decides, I'm going to get rid of all these charges. And then what ends up happening? The statute of limitations inevitably runs out. So you can never, as you said, bring these people to justice. Was it done to cover for people?
Oh, that's exactly it. Was that the point of it?
Right. And we're going to figure that out.
The point of it?
Yeah, we're going to figure that out. And that's wrong. Certainly if it was intentional. But at the very least, it was absolutely stupid. There was no stratagem or no strategy. There was no foresight into this. And it pains me to say it, but as much as I don't like some of the things that the Attorney General's office has done, I don't think that they're that stupid. So I look forward to seeing what the House Oversight Subcommittee comes up with when they get these documents. And if they don't, well, certainly subpoena them. And hopefully she'll certainly turn over the documents a little quicker than the Secretary of State has.
So let's say a year and a half from now, you win the whole thing. Not just the convention, the race. You're the new Attorney General. You take office, you get all the documents that have ever existed, and you find my predecessor did commit lawfare. Not just I think, I know, and I can prove. What then?
Well, if I can prove, and that's the big thing, doing an investigation, and I'm not talking about doing an investigation in the last years and years.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it'll take some time. Do what needs to be done on behalf, again, of the people of the state of Michigan. If there was, intentional wrongdoing, that's criminal, people need to be held accountable. I mean, if it was like a lapse in judgment or someone's doing something stupid, but there was any intention, that's different, right?
Right, absolutely.
But we have to actually have the investigation. And the other thing, too, I have no inside information. I haven't spoken with her, probably won't for a long time or ever. I don't know. But Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi, in addition to Kash Patel, I believe that they're going to be taking a look into a handful of these things occurring in our great state. The Senate Republicans recently sent a letter to both Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, so of course our AG and FBI director, to take a look at some things going on regarding, for example, GBI strategies and voter registrations on the west side of the state, right? But I don't think it's going to stop there. I think they're going to look at a lot of things. What I'm trying to say is I don't know if I'm going to have to do very much, inevitably, if the federal government decides to do something first. Because if I win the whole thing, as you say, and get sworn in, that's January 1st of 2027. I would really hope that if there is wrongdoing discovered by the federal government, they do something prior to that point.
Absolutely. How have you been treated by the media?
Generally, I would say fair, generally speaking. Okay. I mean, you have folks in various newspapers that refer to like Cliff Frosts of the world as fake electors.
Fake electors.
Here's the one thing I'll say.
They put it in every headline, and they did when you announced.
Right. Here's the thing I'll say about that, though. At least they're being consistent. They've said that the whole entire time, right? My press release, we mentioned alternate electors, and then one publication decided to use fake electors. That's fine, and you know why? Because inevitably the Detroit News or the Free Press or whomever, they're not going to be the ones to actually be the arbiter of what happens in these particular cases. The people of the state of Michigan, through its legal system and its courts, will. And I'm convinced that they didn't do anything wrong and that these people will be exonerated. They did nothing wrong. But in terms of the media, generally, they've been fair. I think that they've been fair to the extent that even when you take a look at Dana Nessel and her comments, they actually reported on those comments, both nationally and locally. So maybe there's a slant, but, they could be fair.
Okay. What would you have people know about you? You're at the beginning of a year and a half long process. At least it's going to be another year and some change until the primary. Some people will be hearing your name for the first time today when they listen. What would you have people know about Kevin Kijewski?
Well, first thing I'm going to say is visit my website, kevinformi.com. I'm not asking for any, again, political donations or anything like that right now, but you can see the particular pillars upon which my campaign is based on. And again, we want to make sure that we end the lawfare. We want to go after real criminals. And frankly, we want to ensure that your constitutional rights are protected. And these are key things that the Attorney General is supposed to do. And unfortunately, for whatever reason or multitude of reasons, it hasn't been happening over the past 4 years. And in fact, you take a look at the past 8 years, generally speaking, the amount of time that Dana Nessel has been in office, not quite 8. But, people talk now, crime is down. Well, no, violent crime is still way up from when she took office.
Right.
And the prosecutors of the state of Michigan, they actually take their lead to a large extent from the AG's office. So I just take a look at this as a really big missed opportunity. But who is it really impacting? Michigan citizens who are the victims of crimes, right? And yes, I think that people should be defended if they are accused of crimes with a constitutionally permissible and strong defense, as long as everyone does it ethically. So yeah, I've defended Cliff Ross, I've defended other folks, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we have a fair, impartial system of justice. And I believe that with my track record of consistency as an attorney, in addition to being a school administrator for some pretty large, complicated systems, I'll be able to navigate the complicated system here in Michigan and make sure that the rule of law will prevail.
Just as we were sitting here earlier today, Ellie Savitt, the prosecutor in Washtenaw County, has decided to enter the ring as a Democrat. So now you're not the only man on the ranch anymore. You have a little bit of competition. Is that a name you're familiar with, a game you're familiar with? And if so, do you have a read on Ellie?
The only thing I can say is I understand that he's been an elected prosecutor for a little bit of time. I know that he was kind of like a social activist. He also did kind of teach high school as well, not through like the ACE program I did at Notre Dame. He did something different, and I'm a Michigan State Notre Dame guy. I think the guy went to Yale, that's fine. Or some Ivy League school, but at the same time, it really doesn't matter, because whether it's going to be Totten or if it's going to be any of these other folks, they're going to continue on the Democratic agenda of lawfare, of trying to intimidate people, and not really prosecuting the crimes that need to be brought.
I'd like to wrap up on some trivia here.
Sure.
Got you could say 3.5 questions.
All right.
Longest serving AG in Michigan history.
Kelly.
Right, Kelly, yeah.
He was the Attorney General.
The Eternal, that's exactly it. Won in 1963, left in the 1998 race, which gave us Jennifer Granholm.
Yeah.
So, last Catholic high school to win the D1 football title in Michigan.
Oh, I want to say De La Salle. Am I wrong?
I think they're D2.
Oh, okay.
Catholic Central.
Oh, Catholic Central. Well, I apologize to the bazillion fathers over there at Catholic Central, but yeah.
Yeah, the Shamrocks aren't going to love that. But.
No, but De La Salle, then you take a look at Catholic Central, and even St. Mary's Prep, they're all pretty good.
Absolutely. Yeah. Brother Rice has fallen on hard times in recent years, but you're an MSU guy and a Notre Dame guy. Some would call that unfortunate. When's the last time your two schools, respectively, beat Michigan in football?
Oh, gosh.
I love that it doesn't just come to mind immediately. Yeah. I love that there's no recency to draw on.
I really wish, truth be told, that Notre Dame would play Michigan. They used to for a long time.
Oh, I saw this thing where Notre Dame just signed a 12-year deal to play Clemson. And I had to tell the Clemson people on Twitter, I'm like, just know that what Notre Dame signs today has no bearing on what it will do tomorrow, per se.
Right.
We've had 2-3 times where we've signed these, we're going to play through 2031. Oh. And then a few years later, they cancel the Michigan game.
The thing that I find interesting about the Michigan-Notre Dame rivalry, and again, I'm not trying to offend the maize and blue out there. I mean, they always would play for a few years, and then they would stop.
Yeah.
But they would always stop because Notre Dame won, and Michigan...
That is not at all.
It's absolutely true.
That is not
Until recently. Until recently.
Yeah.
Right?
That is not... No, that is... No. You're at Notre Dame. Did you know Mallory McMorrow at Notre Dame?
No, I got my graduate degree from there, a master's in education. She got a bachelor's degree from there. And I graduated from Notre Dame in 2007, and she's a bit younger than I am. I'm kind of old at 43. So, no, I haven't met her, and I didn't run into her before. Yeah. But, it's going to be interesting to see that U.S. Senate race, what happens. More and more people are jumping in. I think, the former speaker, Representative Tate, he just joined that race.
So you got the field has actually become pretty balanced recently
Yeah.
with Tate, because before we were looking at McMorrow
Mm-hmm.
and Haley Stevens, which to some extent cancel each other out.
Yeah.
And then Haley, that puts her seat up, but the Democrats think they'll hold that. But then you have Abdul El Sayed, who's not a doctor, says he's one, but he never did a resume. He's not a doctor. And then you have Joe Tate, the House Speaker. I don't see some great political talent.
Well, I could say this about, that doctor you noted. I don't know about his residency. I think he's a Rhodes Scholar, and he actually did some things overseas, and, good for him. I didn't do that, right? But it's going to be a very interesting race between all four of these folks, and who knows who else will come in. I even take a look at Haley Stevens. She's leaving her seat. And then I hear about former Representative Trott. He's going to be perhaps seeking that seat, but as a Democrat this time. It's absolutely bonkers and nuts.
I think Dave Trott needed to leave the party a long time ago. I
Yeah.
think he did leave.
Yeah.
It's funny though, because as I've been doing, like we had John Engler on last week, so I got to dive in the archives for him. Even in the John Engler 1994 campaign, his first where he's going for re-election, they actually tried to create a media narrative that Howard Wolpe was going to get some level of Republican support. And so this narrative, they told us about Republicans for Whitmer and then Republicans for Harris. They were doing Republicans for Wolpe when Wolpe had no chance to win. They say the same things. And when you look at it throughout history and see that it's been the exact same playbook, they want to make, let's think about this.
Sure.
We heard a lot about Republicans for Harris last year.
Mm-hmm.
You remember hearing anything about Democrats for Trump?
Well, we used to call them Reagan Democrats,
Mhm.
right? But I think that they have fully switched over to the Trump side of the equation.
I mean, they would have you think there's not one Democrat, not one, not a blue collar guy who lost his job and realizes that illegal immigrants don't help.
Yeah.
Not one. Not because I liked him on The Apprentice.
Yeah.
Not one Democrat in America is a Trump fan to let them tell it. But any Republican who votes Democrat gets their own op-ed column.
Well, here's an interesting anecdote. So, like I said before, I lived in Denver for a bit, and I was superintendent. This was during 2016. And of course, Donald Trump, he's up and coming. He's, against Ted Cruz. Colorado actually has a caucus system instead of a primary. So you actually have to sort of stump for the people that you supported. Back then, I was, called crazy. I supported Donald Trump all the way back in 2016.
Oh my God.
And the funny thing is, and, it's in the Denver Post, the story's still up there, I believe. They actually quoted me when I was talking at the convention. I said, a vote for Ted Cruz is a vote for Hillary Clinton because they're not going to be able to carry it.
Mm-hmm.
Donald Trump is going to be able to carry these Democrats, just like the Reagan Democrats did in Macomb County, where I'm from back in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And, even though Ted Cruz won the delegates for Colorado, we know who ended up getting the nomination and winning in 2016, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I saw that, and I was saying the same thing back then, and it still holds true today.
I read a Rudy Giuliani quote from 2016 about Ted Cruz, where he said that if you were to pick Cruz against Hillary, that's just throwing a fastball down the center of the plate. But if you were to pick Trump, that would be the curveball. And that's exactly how it played out. You were an early adapter on Donald Trump. It is good to hear your voice. It's good to see your face.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to see you make some more headway.
Thanks so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.